Yeah? How much? Awesome. Okay, so as you guys know, you're here for a very special reason. Right? So you can even see it in the name of what this forum is, the Global Youth to Business Forum. And it's special because it's really one of the only ways where youth can interact and speak with business and exchange different ideas and topics and even whether they're controversial or challenging or gain these different perspectives, because it's not every day that we get the opportunity to do this, right? So I hope that all of you got a lot out of this day so far. And now I hope that you are ready for something truly special, which is the opportunity to engage in a conversation with all of these beautiful panelists with me. We're apparently a very beautiful crowd today, all of us. So, who we have here today is representing many different things. So we have students, we have Evelyn, and I guess not students, but youth, Evelyn and Dan, who will be representing the youth voice for us. So Evelyn is the president of ISEC in Australia. Dan is president of ISEC in the UK. We have John Froda here representing startups, representing a young and dynamic company, which many of you know and are familiar with these names. They're cool. And we have Thomas here, who this is the first time you're meeting him, actually. So first time on stage, so let me introduce you properly. Stand up. Stand up. So this is Thomas Madsen Mydale. Okay, Thomas. And he's an angel investor. He's worked with John with Podio, and he's an entrepreneur and an activist, so he's going to be bringing a lot of that perspective to this panel. And then we have another John, who you met earlier today, John Mitchell from UPDHL. And then we have, over here, last but not least, Will McKinney. So, now that we have all of these different perspectives represented in this room, the topic that we wanted to discuss today, something that's quite relevant for us, and especially in this forum, is perhaps what John has mentioned earlier, is the future of work. Because there's a couple of different ways to see it. So one is that the world is changing. There are new things that we need to cover, new problems that we need to solve, new ways of doing business, but also new people that are joining the workforce, which is you. So the future of work sitting right in front of us in the audience, and also our online participants. And with that, there's three questions that I want to talk about today. One is work, so the workplace itself and how that can change in the future, what the trends are, what's shaping it. Also employees, so our generation, and your generation of work. And then, and then last, some of the tools and some of the technology that's shaping the way that we do business. Does that sound good to everyone? Yeah? Good topics? Cool. Okay. So the first thing that I want to ask the panelists is I want to kind of explore this concept, this notion that work is no longer a place that you go, but rather it's a thing that you do. Right? So because John here is all about this future of work, Podio, I want to ask your perspective first and see what are your ideas around this. So what is changing with the workplace these days, and what is changing about work and life and how we balance these things?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is on. Yeah, so it's actually Jennifer McNulty kind of coined that one. The workplace is not a place you go, it's a thing you do. And what does that mean to businesses? First of all, it means that there's no such thing as a core or a gravity center anymore, or at least in many new companies that does not exist. So the idea of building a headquarter that would mirror all your cultural values and so on might be a bit off. And another part of it is if you look at your own work, even in ISEC, most of your time is spent in digital workspaces, whether that is Google Docs or Podio or even in Facebook or whatever. So that's actually your workspace, right? You spend more time, and the older generation spend more time in Outlook and email than they do in the physical space and they take on their headset and now they're working because now they're focused on their digital workspace. So why not build physical workspaces that mirror those digital workspaces? Why are we trying to replicate the physical workspaces into digital workspaces? That is the question that Nobel is asking. And I think that's really interesting. Obviously, there's tools to fix this, but there's also a lot about culture and expectation. People working from, any device, anywhere, people working from home, not being part of a team. What are the kind of challenges there? So those are the kind of things that happen when you're saying that the workplace is no longer a center.
So maybe to follow that up, I'd like to hear some perspective from our youth panelists, our young panelists, because I think I said for all of us that are involved in this organization that this question applies a lot, or this idea applies a lot to what we do and how this organization operates. So any perspective you'd like to share?
Hello?
Never really changed.
So finally the tech-savvy generation answer, tech-savvy. I think, so we spend an awful lot of time, so our main sort of communication method with our distribution model, so with all our different local committees is obviously through sort of online payments now. And we're also looking at how we can increase our engagement levels through the online payments. So it's a big sort of task of the current generation of the organization to see how it's possible to actually deliver meaningful experiences to people without having a physical connection. And that doesn't mean that physical connection and physical interaction and experiences aren't valuable, because they obviously are. But it's about, I think, how you can deliver more value. And so with that, I think the tools that are coming through in terms of Web 2.0 tools and all these disruptive technologies are really sort of helping us and assisting us in delivering these experiences. But I think still, if you place the conversation in terms of work being a sort of a thing you do rather than a place you go, I would potentially even have a sort of a different tact in terms of what work is for me. I think for me, I think that something that's sort of a thread that's been running through my ISEC experience, I think things that I was doing earlier on as well, is that I don't really see this idea of work or this notion of work probably in the same way that my parents do. They would say that work for them is, they get in the car, they drive, they go to work, they sit behind their desk, and they're sort of down to work. They finish and then they come home, and now they're in home. Whereas for me, my job at the moment is not something that I separate like that in terms of the black and white. It's a learning experience for me. And my learning experience sort of might start at home or end at work or whatever. I might be doing little bits of my work at home, and so for me, I wouldn't even draw a line between like work and home life. Probably in the same way that previous generations, my parents and my grandparents would. For them, it was very much that you were sort of driving the economy during the daytime, and then you were driving it home at night time. Whereas for me, the way that I would like to approach my work life, when I go and sort of hit the big bad world, is that I would like to do something that sort of delivered a very enriching learning experience both at home and at work. That makes sense.
Thank you, Dan. So I think it's quite interesting, this concept of finding that balance between work and life and where it separates, where one stops and the other starts. So actually, John, I'd like to get some of your perspective on it, especially coming from a very established company like that's been doing things a certain way for a number of years. So I want to hear maybe any thoughts that you have.
Traditional nature of work, traditional jobs will still continue to exist because people need food, clothing.
No? Oh, how's that?
Even better. All right. Wow. Traditional jobs will continue to exist. Human beings are incredibly flexible tools who can do almost anything. I think what the emerging information economy gives us is a lot of flexibility and a lot of choices. So you'll see trends that are currently continuing to expand even further. Part-time jobs will become more and more important, for example, or the ability to multitask in the workplace. So, you won't stop seeing people build roads or make clothes, but the ability to redeploy those people and to use more piecework and part-time work, I think will continue. Ultimately, I think it's a really liberating thing because it's giving people more choices, even relatively lower down the professional strata. Blue-collar workers now have more choices than before. So as education rises and those choices, the ability to get those jobs increases, labour costs won't rise, but choices for people in terms of doing those jobs will increase. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all good, and this is the way we're heading, and in fact, it's probably already happened. But I think there are some, for the sake of an interesting panel discussion, there are some big, nasty problems in here. So, for example, if I work remotely, where is home, and where is the physical place where we are together as a unit or as a team? I personally believe that we could significantly be more profitable as a company, my company, if we didn't have offices, but we do, and that's part of what we've chosen to do. And you guys work remotely, but I know the international team, live in one another's pockets, and it's that kind of intense lifestyle. And I think, that's a different kind of experience. So one, where is home? Two, if I'm working all the time, it's nice for you at the moment. When you've got, I'm going to sound like a cliched twat, but when you've got kids, and when you've got, when some of the demands of home are greater, like what is it like to have work interrupting at home? What is it like for us? So the state flow. Flow is the state where you're working on something that you're so engaged with that time passes more quickly than you realise. A lot of us know how to get into flow. We put on earphones, we listen to music that gets us to that place. We tell people not to bother us. In a world where I'm doing that, how do I do that at home? What's it like? I don't know. I think there are some tricky problems here. And with the part-time stuff, I think part-time can be really beneficial for people, but it can also be more beneficial for the employer. And I wonder what the switching costs when you're switching between being mother, part-time copywriter, part-time something else. I think there are challenges in here.
Maybe also that's a job for the unions, to lead themselves and find out that if employers expect employees to be always on 24/7, then employers expect to bring their kids to work, or they expect to be surfing Facebook 3 hours every morning, or whatever is considered homey, and not just the other way around. So I guess there will be some counter movement as well, in that, okay, my employer expects me to be on during weekends, and I'm doing other stuff in the work hours.
But I think you're all starting from a standpoint of that they're actually being an employer, which is actually kind of interesting. In my work, investing in lots of small companies in basements and garages all over the world, they're working for themselves. Even the employees that are part of the team are on their own journey because a startup is an extreme learning environment. You have kids out of school joining, becoming heads of sales, etc., etc. So what I'm seeing at all times is people actually employed. They've just chosen to be there because currently that's the place where they can grow the most, where they can learn the most, where it's the tribe they want to be a part of. The place that wants to change the things they're really passionate about. That's the talent struggle I'm seeing. It's also the bias of a small startup, right? I'm seeing lots of people actually not working for anyone. Even the ones that supposedly has a job, I can tell you from being like, chairman of these companies, people are just leaving all the time, joining their own startup or doing their own thing, right? It's not like they've committed to doing this for 5 to 10 years straight. For me, that's the fundamental change, that we're back to being kind of craft people who have our own profession, have our own craft, and we then have different places where we do it. And we're commonly, not employed, generally. And sort of the passion really being about startups suddenly, when I grew up, startup, being an entrepreneur, that meant being on the dole, that meant the ones that couldn't get a job. It's always actually also still a bit like that. Like it might be the guys sitting and girls sitting up way back. The people sitting in the back room are always the renegades and the ones that want to sleep. And they're probably, the next Zuckerbergs and Jobs and whatever, the renegades that are actually not going to do. Am I right out there or?
Not asleep.
They're definitely not, apparently not asleep yet. But I mean, that's what was sticking out. So for me, like, what is work actually? That's even more interesting.
So I think it's really interesting. I think with that question, we opened up a lot of different concepts. So the workplace itself, also this this lifestyle balance, and it sort of, I guess it depends either on personal preference and also the type of role that you have, whether you're self-employed, whether you work in a big company, whether you work as a startup. So all these different factors affect this. So I want to ask the audience, does anybody have any questions or any interesting perspectives or insight they'd like to share? Virtual delegates also. Okay, here.
No difficult questions. But like based on what the gentleman next to you said, I'm sorry I did not catch your name. The question that I have for the other two speakers next to you, sir, is do you think that leadership is still a relevant concept, given that everyone is going towards startup, everyone wants to be self-employed, everyone wants to do their own things, everyone is being empowered. Is leadership still a relevant issue, or will it be a relevant issue in the future? Thank you.
So I think, just to clarify, I think, in being self-employed is also about being part of something, right? You want to own a part of the company you're working in. You really want to be a part of it. You actually want to participate, right? You want to be where the decisions are made. You want to be part of it. So, just to clarify, obviously we can't all work in the, as single freelance individuals. Most companies are, that's not how creation happens now, or how value is created. But I think it is the participatory aspects of actually being part of it, fundamentally, legally, etc. That's the big paradigm shift for me.
I actually think that leadership is even more important when you are creating culture bottom up. You actually have the choice. Instead of joining and resisting culture and creating your own, that's leadership, big time. It's not just about, day-to-day management. It's about, what kind of values do you want to instill. I think Bill's point was really good earlier about the significance of what you do. I think that's maybe even more important when you start the company, because then you don't have to turn it around later and hire him.
So the question, is leadership still important if everyone's self-employed? I mean, I think absolutely, because the point that John here is making, I think there's a real tension between Thomas's points and John's points. Like, can you run DHL with freelancers? Can you build motorways with freelancers? Can you do air traffic control crowdsourced? Can you, through Twitter? I don't think so. I think one of the really interesting patterns in the future of work is the tension between these megalithic organisations that need to deliver national health services and big stuff, and then the startup community dancing around the edges, innovating, disrupting, changing things. So I think leadership is constant in both of those. And I think the other thing is, if you haven't yet, and I'm sure you will, but if you become self-employed or you become a freelancer, and you ask any freelancer or any self-employed person, leadership is a day-to-day activity, self-leadership, getting out of bed in the morning, keeping the promises that you made to people, chasing up the crap you don't want to chase up, it requires you to be a whole business in one person. So, yeah, it changes, but it's the same thing.
I think if you want a good example of where Labour is going, because there's upsides and downsides here, I think you should look at the recent London Olympics, which was staffed by huge numbers of volunteers, huge numbers of paid staff, corporate sponsors, a real kind of federation of people coming together to make something wonderful happen, actually, a really great event. And a lot of that is off the back of information. It just simply wouldn't have been possible to do that 20 years ago. You wouldn't have been able to sign up that many volunteers in that amount of time. It would be a huge administrative undertaking. So those kind of giant projects, particularly in the area of infrastructure, will continue and probably will get even more ambitious. I hope they get even more ambitious, because that will mean that the world is starting to tackle some of the really, really big problems that it has. But it also, the downside of that is lots of people looking for free. Okay? Some of them in relatively menial jobs. So you still need very charismatic leaders in that type of environment, because otherwise nobody will want to work for them.
So, just to kind of go off on a different note, and also kind of connected to the topic of leadership and also how you can engage the people in your workplace, I think a very relevant discussion for us in this is, what are the new generations looking for in the labor market? So what are we as young people looking for, and then how does that connect to, or how does that relate to what startups are looking for, or what large, like, multinational established companies are looking for? So if anybody wants to share.
There's actually some research by Citrix which told you are saying that 75% of the millennials, want to have a job where worship. They would pick a job where worship was available, where they could decide, what hours they work themselves. That's 70% of the labor market saying that they would pick that job over another. And that's like a very obvious one. Can you design the plan, design your work, or do you have to go into the office today, you have to go back? That's an important one. But I think maybe the question is proud of it.
I think first I'd like to get some perspective from Evelyn and Dan, and see, as a representative of youth, what they think.
Cool. I think throughout all the sessions, one common thing that most of the speakers have talked about is the sense of purpose. So I guess when we were talking about whether we want to distinguish work from the workplace, and or is it something that you simply do, is that if you manage to, align your workforce with the purpose of the company itself, then given that there's so many different resources and needs that I could, I can pick up a class online that I wouldn't need to pay for anything during my own time, but I would still consider that as contributing towards achieving whatever I was assigned to during work. But I would be doing it really willingly, because I find the value in doing that, because I'm not only developing myself, but then I would also be able to perform better during work. So it seems like purpose was one of the things that everyone has mentioned in various points.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that something that can't be sort of overlooked is these generational shifts, and generational shifts that occur very logically as well. I think ever since you sort of had the world connected in events that sort of bring in the whole world, you start to have very logical shifts which then define generations. So my parents were defined by a very different sort of era than I was. They were defined by one where going to university was a way to stand out from the crowd. Whereas for me, now I'm coming from the UK, where 53% of the sort of young people are going to university. And so, in fact now, just a simple maths tells you that, well, standing out from the crowd isn't going to university anymore. And so there's massive shifts here. I think also this idea of sense of purpose is huge. I think there's almost like this lost generation at the moment. A generation of people that sort of see things going on, sort of see crisis and banking, sort of corrupt morality in banking industry, all this sort of thing, and think, oh well, do I want to be part of that or not? And or maybe the way that I can sort of not be a part of that is to define my own sense of purpose, and then be very adamant about finding that in the workplace that I want to get into. And I really do think that there is a greater sort of consciousness of values and values requirement that comes up. That's definitely what I feel.
So then based on what you're saying, our generation's looking for a sense of purpose in whatever we're doing. We're looking for this type of flexibility of these added kind of benefits that working in some companies may offer than others. And also finding an organization or a place that aligns with our sense of values. So then I'd like to address that question again to this side of the panel. And get your perspective on what your organization is doing to address those, or maybe some of the challenges that you see with the shift in what our generation is looking for.
Okay, I think it's key that the pursuit of profit, shareholder return, this is a kind of very 1980s business school way of looking at the world, and it's not good enough anymore. It's not good enough for any organisation, like my own included. I think it's quite difficult for some organisations and cultures that are entrenched in that way. But even banking actually serves a very noble purpose. It's the way that you lend people money to get stuff, right? To build houses, to start businesses. This is a very, very noble profession. It's been somewhat demeaned in recent times by the various scandals that we have. But banks that can rediscover that essential social value that they're offering and not being perceived as greedy, money-grabbing, bonus-hugging fat cats, these guys will do really, really well. And they will need some scale, because big projects require big money. So it's not like the big companies will disappear. But those organisations really do need that sense of purpose. And DHL, I talked about earlier on, it was, to get the stuff that people want to the people who want it when they need it. That's a nice, easy sense of purpose. Yeah, we care about the money and we care about the numbers because we couldn't pay our employees or our investors if we didn't have that. But that's not the reason we do it. The reason we do it is because it performs an important social function. So it's a very well made point. Thank you.
I just had a comment on the whole thing about purpose, because it's sort of counterintuitive with this much employment and crisis around the world. 20% of youth, according to Urban Net in Spain, are looking for a job. And then we are saying that they're very picky about it. Actually, think about just trying to challenge that notion that everyone would pick values over actually getting a job in a crisis situation. Is that really so? On a broad scale, or is it like a privileged few with the higher education and all the right ideas?
So I don't know, I mean, coming from, there's an association in the UK that sort of represents all the graduate recruiters. And they say that the vacancies have actually increased over the last 5 years, whilst graduate unemployment has also increased. And they say that it's not necessarily because they're being more picky with the candidates they're approaching, but it's because candidates are becoming much more sort of, on the face of it, picky with who they want to work for. So you see a lot of candidates going towards the sort of the higher end jobs and the sort of more attractive jobs, and then much fewer candidates going towards the career paths which aren't so attractive. And then you try and examine, well, why are some much more attractive than others when the common motivators, like the wage packet, isn't really that much different. And I think the thread that runs through that is the sort of the company culture that exudes and the work-life balance. Like we're going to talk about that again, and what they feel like their life is going to be like when working at that company. Which, again, like my own perspective, talking to my parents, that wasn't necessarily the most pressing thing that was on their mind. The most pressing thing that was on their mind was this idea that I have to get a job to be able to sort of bring them the cash so that I can look after my family. Whereas it seems that there's different things that are more important.
And I also think, I guess, it's hard to put like a generalization comment to say one or the other, or majority or minority. Like for example, in Australia, there are some websites that they essentially put the idea of like when you rank restaurants, like you have different, like you have about the mood, the services, the food, how it looks, and the atmosphere and everything, like something that's really intangible. So they sort of like, there's some, I guess, underground website that's kind of rank multinational corporation and talk about the Grab programs. And from my understanding, they can't do it too publicly because there's certain information that they're not supposed to be revealed. So it's sort of like you can find spots that you can look up for that information. And I think the fact that those websites exist clearly indicate that when people are picking what company they want to work for, there's certain criteria that they, in their mind, that they rank one or the other higher or the other lower. But it's hard for you to say one would receive more applicants simply because they have a higher ranking in salary, for example, or the other way around, because the sense of purpose is really there and therefore. So I think it's hard to put a generalization comment.
So I want to open up this question also to the audience. So as future employees or employers yourselves, is there anything that you'd want to ask the panelists up here, or any perspective that you'd like to know about? We have a question over here.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Lavlin from ISEC in South Africa. So the first thing, yes, you can check us. And the first thing I wanted to say, just touching on this matter of people and deciding on where they want to work based on values. And I would say, just like Evelyn said, we really shouldn't generalize about that. I personally feel, and just from what I've been seeing, and if I take South Africa, for example, being able to decide on where you're going to work based on your values is a huge luxury. And a lot of the time, for example, the companies that provide the best salary packages aren't necessarily companies that have the best values or are making the world a better place, but they've managed to gain such a big market share that they can offer that, and so they get the best graduates in their program. So that's the first thing. And the question I wanted to ask though to the panel was, firstly, do we think that the market is, okay, so let me just back up. Earlier in the day, I think it was Vishan from Mind Valley, he was talking about how, university education might not necessarily be as relevant as it has been. And obviously, he did make a lot of good points. What I wanted to ask though is, do we think that the current global market is actually ready for that? So in terms of employers that are in existence now, do we think that they're ready for a bunch of young people who either don't have good grades or went to varsity and dropped out, or whatever the case may be? Are they willing to take people in just like that because you say you've got some good leadership background? Okay, that's my first question. Second question that I wanted to ask, that was just one. It's just one. Is the market ready? Okay. Yes, that's one. Then two questions. I'll be done in a second.
Maybe we can answer the first question first.
Oh, go ahead.
And then
I'll just hold
we
the
can
mic.
answer the second one.
I actually have a comment on that because I don't think education is going away, and I don't think it should be, because it's a way of creating equality in society at the same time. I think that's mighty important. So I think that people have a right to education, and I actually think we should support that. That being said, I think the future of work is to have continuous education, and I think that's the difference between the industrial model, where you would kind of get your education and then you can fill out a job function for 40 years without reading a book, doing any courses, and what we are going to be doing, because you're going to study all life. Well, I am literally going to study all life as well. So I think that's the difference. Not whether people are going to get formal training and education at all, because I don't think that makes any sense. At least not, I don't want to go to that hospital.
A point I'd like to make is no company hires you because of what you have done. They hire you because of what they want you to do in the future. Now, the past may indicate that, and that includes your education. But if that's all you've got to offer, you're not going to get a job. So it's about the promises you can make going forward.
Yeah, just to pick up on John's point, I think one of my favourite quotes is a Mark Twain quote, and it's "Don't let your schooling interfere with your education." And I think this is a really important point to pick up on when you talk about this lifelong education you're looking for. I think that is the answer to sort of developing as society. It's sort of having a conscious shift from this is our period where we get educated, and then this is our period where we put that education into action. Towards a new model, which is we go through a constant cycle, a constant sort of feedback cycle of education and action and learning, and then re-education and reaction. And with that, I think then you look at the current education system and you think, well, what is that education system providing? What I would say, or what I would hypothesize, is that it's not necessarily providing the hard knowledge and the hard facts that are relevant to employers. As Vishen was saying, it's the stuff that you're studying at university, so studying at university, is going to be irrelevant in 3 or 4 years' time. Which I think the rate of change, if you take like Roger's Law and all this, Moore's Law, you can probably agree with. But then I think there is some very relevant stuff that you do learn at university or prior to university, or if you don't go on university, go on gap years or exchange years or anything like this. And I think that's life skills. And I think that probably the best thing about university for me was an ability to put off jumping into something without knowing what I was jumping into, and having the time and space and freedom to sort of try my hand at different things so that I could learn what I wanted to do and what would sort of fulfill me as a person. And I think that's what employers should be starting to look at. How did this person, this candidate, use their time at university to really understand what their skills and strengths were, rather than just, was this person able to jump through academic hoops and prove that they can perform under guidelines that have been given to them.
Any thoughts?
So I think to that point, like I think what I see with a lot of people like age 25, 27, it really is an amazing time to really get real practice in doing stuff, right? So what I see is a lot of people starting companies at that age because they don't have anything to lose. They're very open. Hopefully, you guys, they don't have any biases or many biases. They're all used to earning very little, and they're able to work like crazy. Not like us with kids and everything, where we can't put in 80 hours a week because we have a more important project called our kids. So I think it is really an age to really value what decision you make on how you start your path ahead. Because I see so many like 40-year-old, 45-year-olds, big house, big car, the whole thing. They want to be entrepreneurs, but it's just really, really, really hard. Because basically you need to have funding and money to earn the same amount of money from day one. You can't really take a lot of risk, right? You're actually just at the intersection where you can take extreme risk. Whatever, you're taking an extreme risk no matter what, alluding to John's point earlier. So I think, how do you really balance out getting the actual practice, apart from all the theory that's probably already in your head? It's pretty simple, but it all becomes very, like black and white, depending on what decisions you make. I see a lot of people that then join an established company when they're 30 years old, because, most companies fail, but they're joining from a totally different standpoint because they have shitloads of real, actual experience compared to somebody that was on the graduate program and a few years later they're on that path. So I would value not stopping your education and just jumping, but still focusing on getting the most extreme environment for getting as much practice as you can.
I would just say briefly, like all of these paths are valid. My sister, she's academically oriented, she's great at that, she does her dissertations, she enjoys that works for her. Me, I dropped out, I got on with doing what I did. I don't think there's a right path, but That's a really powerful point, right? I made there. Do what feels right.
Thank you. Okay, my second question quickly. No, I'm serious. You only get one global youth forum a year. Okay, so anyway, the other thing I wanted to ask is, so I'm a politics and international relations student, and one of the things that, one of the things that really frustrates me about international businesses is how a lot of their operations are based in countries that have a lot of political instability. And so a lot of the time, their operations in that country tend to exacerbate a lot of the political problems that are there. Okay? So the question I want to pose to you guys is, what do you think could be the role of youth organizations like this this is very radical, in lobbying against big companies whose names I will not mention, but they're involved in lots of oil and mining and in terms of natural. Okay, thanks.
I actually like that question because I think it's very important to think that way and not getting fooled by smart CSR campaigns. And I think local ownership. What are the local entrepreneurs like? And I know it's an easy question coming from an entrepreneur, but how could I say support entrepreneurs in South Africa? So you get local ownership that follows, the ownership and the people working for that company actually is in the interest of the community that is around it. Because that's one of the cool things about startups is that they are pretty much where they start, right? So that you might say. Then there's obviously a whole part of this as well.
So I think one thing to keep in mind, though, when we enter this conversation is kind of connecting back to that sense of purpose and why. I think we often make the mistake of categorizing, let's say, a startup with a company that has a lot of sense of purpose and they have a clear picture of the why the company was created. But in the end, really all companies were created with a reason, right? Like they were created with a sense of purpose. They were created with a why. So maybe the future of these companies is really taking a step back and why they were created. So it's not that a lot of these big companies are they're doing bad, because in the end, we need them. Like we were talking about before, we still need banks, we still need energy companies, we need all of these things. So just to kind of segue a little bit into from that point, I think that's something we can keep in mind. I think we're based on the interest of time. I think there's another topic that we might want to discuss as well, especially since it's a huge thing that we can't really avoid, but obviously it's the technology trends that are shaping the world today, and especially in an organization like ISEC, for example. A lot of conversations that we're having are how can we adapt and how can we reorganize our operations to take advantage of these trends, or to leverage them, or to change the way that we do things. So let's open up this question to the panel. So let's talk about and explore how some of the future tools, how tomorrow's tools are shaping the way that we do things today.
Looking at me again. Okay, so as probably the oldest guy on this panel, I'm being asked how new technology is shaping the future of the workplace. Okay, Facebook. Who's been watching the progress of Facebook over the past few weeks and its plummeting share price? I think we really need to be really careful about how we value this stuff, and I think this is something that the markets are really struggling with, because there's definitely value in these new type of information systems that are available to us. Clearly is, but people are really struggling to kind of get a handle on what that value actually means. It's not actually a new problem, because this first happened with the introduction of email. What was the value of email? Now nobody can imagine doing without it. Same with mobile phones, and it will be exactly the same with these new information tools moving forward. What I do know is that if you're a guy who can work out how to effectively value these types of enterprises and these types of tools, you'll make a fortune. Because there's definitely money in that. In terms of what it means for the workplace, or the future of people doing more conventional jobs like mine, just that connectedness to the world means that you will be able to get hold of resources more easily, more cheaply, and deploy them more cheaply, more easily, more speedily than you did before. And if you can master that, then you'll have a head start on your competition. I think it's a trend that will continue.
I think, the one for me that I'll check in is about email and how totally screwed email is. I don't know what your experience is, but with older audiences, if you ask a question like, who gets too much email? Like, let's do it now. Who gets too much email? And it's even worse, I would say, in kind of corporate workers. Yeah, and it's destroying people, because the culture at the moment is that an email has to be replied to. And actually, in law, there have been cases where CEOs and other corporate officers and directors have been found negligent because they were sent information in an email that they didn't read. But the problem is that the cost of sending an email from me to 800 people here today is next to zero. But the cost to you of processing that email is quite high. Let's say it takes all of you 3 minutes. Then it's cost me nothing, but it's cost you, it's cost everyone 3 minutes times 800 people. So I think we're going to see, and Podio is a good example of this, Facebook, Twitter, we're seeing a move into these tools that people call flow tools, which are much more like a passing river of information that you dip your cup into occasionally, take a little drink, and then dip out. Whereas at the moment, most of us have, I've got about 645 emails starred for reply in Gmail, and I look at the bottom of that pile every so often, and it's so old and outdated that, so email is screwed, I think, is one thing. I think the other interesting trend for the future of work is, most of us now have all of these notifications and alerts in our pocket on a piece of glass, in our mobile phones, and you will have seen those Google glasses. It's not actually science fiction anymore to put that information on glasses, so I could be looking at you now, and in the top left corner I could see that someone had liked my stupid picture of Moscow hotel soap, or whatever. So I think that it would be interesting, because we'll be in work meetings, we'll be having work conversations, and it won't even be our eyes distracted to the laptop, it will be beamed into our eyes. I could be playing Battlefield 3 on PS, I could be playing Battlefield right now, and you'd all, that would be wicked, wouldn't it?
So I have a comment on this one, and I think we actually lack maybe a higher level of looking at technology, in that, technology is not value neutral. A lot of people think that technology is just doing something for us. Well, it's true to start with. We create the tools, and then the tools create us. So there is value hidden, like behavioral mechanism hidden in technology. So a tool like Podio or Twitter makes you do things that email doesn't make you do. So it makes you like things. It makes you tap people on the shoulder. Facebook makes people like other people more. You cannot dislike stuff. You can like things. So the inherent value of Facebook is actually tapping people on the shoulder at all times and saying, cool, 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 cool. Whereas, that feature is totally not existing in corporate IT, right? So look at all those tools out there that you're using, and see what are the real values that they bring, like email and documents. What is that world? It comes from, the document was made to be printed out and sent. That's why Word was invented. It was not invented to send attached to an email. It was to kind of make it easier to print stuff. And now we use those tools to do something else. So that those tools start to run us. We're not in charge. And I think that's the most important thing. The best feeling that you have with technology is when it just works the way you want it to. That's why people just set up Dropbox or whatever for their company and ignores IT entirely, and just start using the consumer-grade products because they're much easier to use, and we are happy. So I think that's where we should come from, is like saying, okay, what's wrong with these hierarchy and command control tools where you have to ask the IT department to set up a workspace in SharePoint or whatever, and it takes 2 months and you never get that. And you can do it like this in whatever tool online, even for free. So these are the changes. what kind of value these tools are actually bringing. Not just the value as in, in efficiency gain and productivity gain, but the value in terms of what behavior they are actually leading towards. More sharing.
But I think, John, what you're basically talking about is kind of this, which transcends all we've spoken about today, is like this humanization of everything, right? We're shifting from industrial thinking to human thinking. And that's basically what's happening in the tool space, that it's people who are thinking about how people use tools that are actually making conscious design decisions in how we design products and how we create them, and how they shape culture. And that's really what's happening, right? That we're building tools to empower human beings, not the industrial thinking that is common, which kind of transcends the whole thing. That a lot of the stuff we've spoken about is really looking at everything from a very humanistic standpoint compared to an economy standpoint or whatever it might be. So that's really the challenge for people like you. How do you create technology, right? Most of you guys here probably don't consider yourselves technologists. But technology is 50% of the world, right? I'm sitting on a piece of a tool called a sofa. I have this tool called a bottle here that lets me transport water. It's really efficient. Everything in life, we just call it technology if it's new, right? Everything else we just take for granted. But what happens when people like you start creating technology? And obviously, whether you can do it or not, design it, create it, shape it, because technology really changes the context of everything, right? It's the most, if you want to create change, it's the most radical way to create change using technology tools, or creating technology tools. It's pretty simple, it's nothing, quasi-intelligent or anything. I'm the level of Will's basic statements here. But I would really challenge you to look at technology that way. How can you create it? How can you shape it? How can you make it, master it, instead of it controlling you, right? I think that's the big shift.
So John, I'm actually interested in hearing your perspective on how do you deal with some of these, I guess, requests or these challenges for technology that's more user-friendly when maybe you already have like a system established. And then how is that also tying back to youth? How are you dealing with that in terms of your employers and what they're looking for, your employees, sorry, what they're looking for, and dealing with that on a daily basis?
As an IT director, you mean? Okay. So it's interesting. I'll answer a little obliquely, if I may. We've recently been doing some IT leadership work inside the company. And we shipped in some consultants to help us, the way big companies do. And one of the things they told us, and it was a message that really hit home to our leadership team, was that there won't be any CIOs in the future. So you guys here who've all got aspirations to be CIOs, I'm sorry, that job is gone. Because the best thing an IT guy can do in a company these days is, and it sounds like a cliche, but John said it, is liberate the workforce. It's liberate the workforce. Because, the generation, my generation and the generation ahead of me, they still struggle a little bit. And the email dysfunction that Will refers to is a great example of that. But your generation, you are plugged in and connected, and you do not think about it the same way. It's like a second limb for you, or a third limb, or a fourth limb, sorry. Fifth limb, I know. But it's part of you. And it will become less and less about the delivery of the bits of cable and the boxes, and more and more about what you can do with it. And you don't particularly need to be a technologist to deliver that. There'll always be a requirement for a guy to take your call and come and fix something. Those are jobs that aren't going away. But in terms of IT directors designing the IT strategy and the job I really hate actually are architecture guys, infrastructure, architecture. These jobs will become increasingly less and less relevant because it's what you do with it, not what it is that counts.
Okay, so does anybody in the audience or any of our virtual delegates have a question?
Just read them out.
My name is Vlad, I'm from Russia. So, with my question, I want to link the one about the education, which has been asked, and this topic about the technology, one question. So, what is the main, maybe, at least one of the main roles of education now? Is, okay, there is, for example, some lecturer who is giving some information, some knowledge to the students to teach us. But now we are getting to the world where information is getting open. So there is Wikipedia and so other lots of data of information. And maybe in nearest future we will have like really huge data of all the informations collected all over the world, and everyone can have access to this base, let's say. So what will be the role of education in this case? How do you think how it could look like, and would it be still relevant?
There's an amazing guy called Sugata Mitra, and he's an Indian professor. He's done this program, you can see his TED talk. And he basically him and his colleagues noticed that the quality of education falls the further you get away from Delhi. So what he did was, he went really far away from Delhi, and he put a Windows computer in a wall with no instructions, no teaching, no tutorial. And the kids in the village taught themselves how to use the computer. Then they taught the older people how to use the computer. They learned English, but English as if it was a Windows PC. And now I spoke to him, and he said he's experimenting. He's working in Newcastle, he's working in Boston. He's like, you've got deprived communities. We need to sort out your education in the Western world as well as in my homeland. And he's now experimenting he wants to fly over deprived areas, dropping technology, and people just picking up technology and teaching themselves. So I think, education, when there's an abundance of information, and there's the Khan Academy, and there's TED videos, and there's Wikipedia, and there's all of these crazy communities who are really specialists in car engineering and spreadsheets and IT software development. I don't know, the role of education becomes entirely different. My dad's a teacher. I'd love to know what he would make of it, but I think there's going to be a much larger self-led component. And check out the Sugata Mitra TED video. It's totally inspiring.
I'd like to add to that. I think actually somehow I disagree, because I think you're right that technology can enable and empower, but I think the role, the real question was, what's the role of education? And just assuming that education will be around for a little while, I think that what we need to learn is how to find out what's trusted sources, what's real, what's manipulated, what is valid, right? We have problems like with censorship of Wikipedia. It's a fact. It's not just out there in a form that you can take for granted. You need to work with education when it comes to finding out what is actually real data and what is not real data. And I think that's the most important part of, or at least one very big important part of education going on for the future. Is helping students to find out what is actually the real data they're looking at and what is bogus. You can find tons of stuff on the internet. It doesn't mean that it's true. We talk about information as if it's good. Information is not good. It's just data.
Really interesting question to think about. Do we have any questions from our virtual delegates from ICTV? No? Okay. So we have a question over here.
Hi, so my question is about technology, the current topic. So I'd like to get the opinion of our panelists on the direct link, or perhaps the link that we can see between, the fast growing industry of technology and how there's just new things coming up every day, and the issue of consumerism. Because we know that, when we have new technology, it's also making people want to get that technology, and everyone's just going to collect everything, like an iPad, an iPhone, or everything. And also in how you think it's going to impact our society, and especially that we're also considering about, sustainability in the future. That's it.
Okay, I'll try. By the way, where are you from?
Hello. I'm representing Isaac France, but I'm originally from the Philippines.
Okay. Not every bit of the technology market is growing, and there's plenty of companies that are struggling. You know, you look at Sony posting very poor results, and Nokia posting very, very poor results. So it depends in which space you're in. So I think technology is becoming less and less a kind of a thing. It's more about how you use it. Now, there are still some clear breakthroughs that we can see coming, that the company that first manages to produce those is going to make a lot of money and be very successful. Rollable screens, it's got to be coming soon. I know there's loads of people working on that. That's a great technological innovation. But it will become more and more ubiquitous, and you'll stop thinking of it as technology. As Thomas said, you'll start thinking of it as a bottle, a plastic bottle.
So I think let's take another question, and then let's wrap up with some closing thoughts from the panelists, or some closing comments from this day. So right over here. See how fast the mic can get to you. Not so bad.
That mic needs an interface designer.
I'm Phil from Germany. My question would be, what is the role of technology when it comes to foster human interaction and emotional connectivity?
To stay out of the way.
No, like not stay out of the way. Like technology, you shouldn't feel that you're using technology. That's my whole point. We are in a very early stage of everything, the internet, the iPads. We will laugh in 20 years about how awkward Twitter was. And I think, technology has to step into the background. It's not you don't need a manual in 20 years to use that phone to do something about a microphone or something. You do, technology has to step away. You need to get, you need to get the interface away from people.
Just shortly, but I think to what John spoke about earlier, we also really need to look at what the technology is doing, right? Facebook is making us like a lot of things and connect with a lot of people we actually don't really know, because it's in Facebook's interest to earn more money and spend more amount of time, right? I get 150 people congratulating me on my birthday, of whom 145 of them never would have known what date my birthday was, never would have called me up or texted me and sent me a message, right? So I think, we're creating a lot of artificial connection, which is good because it's openness and it's a level of participation that means you create new relationships. But we should also really be aware when it's really artificial. Is it really real? How do I react to 150 people whom I don't really actually know congratulating me on my birthday? They don't even know how old I am. It's like, and then that becoming a thing, right? So I think we need to really look very gentle at it and be very conscious about the design we do, and really be aware of the intent of the services we're using, right? Because the intent in many instances is to use it more for the sake of making more money, showing more banners for Mr. Zuckerberg's personal income, right? So I think there's a long way to go there. We're very early in these social tools.
I think another thing, and this might link to your point about consumerism and the dangers of sort of more consumerism because there's more things out there to consume, which I don't know whether was answered or not. But I think as you get more technology and technology starts to interfere with the sort of social dynamics of friendship groups, family, workplace dynamics, all of this sort of thing, ultimately what's happening is complexity is increasing. And complexity is sort of increasing sort of year after year after year. What's then needed is there needs to be a sort of paradigm shift in the way that we as sort of users and consumers of all this technology can deal with that complexity. Ultimately what's required is greater depth of thought, because the world isn't so simple anymore. The world isn't so simple anymore as you're living in a village where all you know is that village and those 30 people that live in the village. Now, as you say, you've got 150 people that say happy birthday, which you probably don't even know sort of link the sort of the names, the faces, the personalities of all those people that are doing it. So I think what's required is a great amount of depth of thought, and depth of thought for me is a function of leadership. So I think a sort of nice thing to bring it back to is this idea that is leadership relevant anymore? Well, yes, it's sort of more relevant. It's ever more relevant because life is becoming more complicated, and we can either choose to deal with it or we can choose not to. And that's what I think the sort of latter option isn't very attractive.
Thank you. So, just to wrap up the panel for the evening, I think we've had a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting insights and perspectives from different generations and also different backgrounds of how we work. So, do any of you guys have any final thoughts or comments that you want to share to close the day? Or anybody in the audience, if anybody wants to share something? Yeah.
I think I could go. I think like the reason why we're all up here on the stage, hopefully, the reason why we're all in the room is because we want to make the world a better place for us and for the sort of people that follow us. And I think like if you follow on from conversations about this idea of complexity, which is ultimately the place that we're getting in with the way that business is evolving, the way that technology is evolving, I think we require a different currency of life. You have this currency of life that when life was simple, the currency of life was money. And then the sort of currency of life at the moment is time, where sort of money is time. Time is money. But I think ultimately then that begs a different question, which is what do you do with that time? And I think you can either choose to use that time with a great level of thought and sort of trying to understand where you are, where the world is, or not. And so I think that the big thing for us to all sort of take away, and the big thing that I've sort of been wrestling with over the last couple of years is how do I spend my time most wisely so that my depth of thought can increase. Then after that would be, well, what's the currency that will evolve after that as society evolves?
Just to add to that, I would want to have you give me a pledge. You're just about to make a really important career decision on the path of your lives, probably very soon. And I really want you to know there are two options that you really should consider apart from all the stuff that's currently in your heads. One thing is you could actually start your own company. It is actually possible. A lot of people will help you. All other entrepreneurs are out there to help you because they always remember the people that helped them when they started. Second thing is there are actually jobs in startups where you can get great experience and join the basement when the Napoleon was 7 people or 8 people or something like that, right? In Berlin, there were more jobs created in startups than any other industry the last 12 months. So there are actually really jobs, and there's a lot of challenges. And my pledge to you is really consider. It's much more difficult to find these jobs and these networks compared to somebody coming to you offering you a job because you are some of the brightest of our generation, right? Of your generation. I'm getting old. But please do consider, find the local startups in the community, hook up with them, see what, at least explore the opportunity. Could be that it's not the right thing for what you're on track to do, but please do consider it. Can you pledge that? Yeah.
So they cannot apply for a job at Podium. They have to start themselves. So how big is a startup? How big can a startup be? 600.
So I think a key takeaway from this day is that whether it's in a startup or whether it's in not so startup anymore, like the case of Podium, or whether it's in a company that's been established for a while, there's always a avenue for you to impact change in some way or another. And I think that's what we learned a lot today, that our generation is going to really change the way we do things, change the way that the world operates, and change the way that we work. So with that, I'd like to close this panel, and I thank all of you panelists for your time, your thoughts, and your insight. And thank you to all of the audience for your attentiveness and your thought-provoking questions. And thank you as well to the virtual delegates who participated.